Good afternoon and welcome to Midday Moms. This is Dorothy Pilarski welcoming you, all of you, as you're signing on. I'm hoping that as you're signing on, that you say hello to us in the hello to us in the chat. Hi, Suzanne. Suzanne is one of our Catholic Moms Group leaders. Nelsie, hello, another one of our Mothers Group leaders. Karen, great to see you. Claude, all the way from Dubai. I always love saying that. She's joining us today. Anyway, a very big warm welcome to each and every one of you. I hope that you had a wonderful Christmas and a happy New Year, and I'm completely thrilled to be back. Oh, and Tracy, another one of our Catholic Moms Group leaders. Great to see you here. And we have an incredible guest today, Dr. Mary Elizabeth Cuff, who has written my new favorite book on motherhood. As all of you know, Midday Moms, it works in partnership with CatholicMomsGroup.com. I always say, if you have a hard time finding us, just remember three words, CatholicMomsGroup.com. And we are faith partners with the Archdiocese of Toronto on a mission to revive motherhood as a vocation, as a call from God. And we're always on the lookout for moms to start a Catholic Moms group. So we're going to share with you our ministry video, and we're praying and hoping that one of you will be inspired to start a Catholic Moms group at your parish. You know, as I always say, starting a moms group isn't rocket science. But we want to help you. We want to help you every step of the way. So I'm just going to share our ministry video for those of you maybe that haven't met us before. And here we go. So we can help you start one of three types of groups: for moms only, mothers and tots, or if you need some coaching with virtual meetups, we can help you do that as well. And here's our ministry video.
Mothers, by our very nature, we are nurturing, loving caregivers. We are social beings, made for friendship and community. We are also spiritual by nature, made by a loving God to know Him and love Him, and to pass this love of our Catholic faith on to our children. But right now, many mothers feel overextended, distracted, and exhausted. Though as Catholics, we have the community of our church, many mothers attending Mass could not name the moms sitting next to them in the pew they share. Community and support among Catholic mothers is desperately needed in this hectic and chaotic culture. Your parish needs you to bring these moms together.
Hi, my name is Dorothy Pilarski. I'm the founder of Catholic Moms Group. We at Catholic Moms Group are on a mission to revive the vocation of motherhood. We exist to bring together like-minded, faith-filled mothers who crave community and are focused on spiritual growth, Catholic teaching, and fellowship. Can you imagine a thriving, engaged mothers group at your parish? A group of moms in love with their Catholic faith, ready to serve other mothers no matter what stage of motherhood they're at. Can you imagine what a difference that would make at your parish? Starting a mothers group, it's not rocket science, but working with a team who's done it before and who's done it dozens and dozens of times sure does help. The Catholic Moms Group membership site is an online community that offers training, resources, and dozens of tools for parishes to help them start a mothers group quickly and efficiently. We're here to provide you with a clear path to launching a Catholic Moms Group at your parish. All of our materials are 100% Catholic. We have clearly laid out meetup plans for both moms groups and toddler groups. We are obedient to the magisterium of the Catholic Church. We have created dozens of tools that are going to save you time and energy. And besides that, we love our Blessed Mother. We constantly turn to her for her intercession. You can make a huge impact in your parish, so join us. We are revolutionizing the way parishes start mothers groups by providing parishes with a Catholic mothers group starter kit and by nourishing and training a community of Catholic mothers group leaders across the world. It's time to start a mothers group at your parish. Join us today.
And so that last picture was taken at one of our Dynamic Women of Faith conferences, and that conference is coming up in Toronto, Canada, on March the 22nd. We've got a ton of great speakers, and Bishop Cassoon is going to be celebrating our closing mass. So if any of you would like me to send you some brochures, let me know, and we can mail them. Anyway, I am just so delighted today to introduce you to Dr. Mary Cuff. She is a homeschooling mom, an independent scholar, and a writer. She holds a PhD in American literature and classical rhetoric from the Catholic University of America and is the proud alumna of the University of Dallas. Her writing has appeared in Crisis Magazine, Modern Age, and Law and Liberty. She has been a guest on Guadalupe Radio and now Midday Moms, and I'm sure other radio stations as well. She and her husband are homesteading-lite in rural Pennsylvania. So I'd like all of you to help me welcome Dr. Elizabeth Cuff. She's written an incredible book that I have just fallen in love with. It's called Mother to Mother. And if you see my copy, I've underlined page after page after page. I've just loved it. So welcome, Mary. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. No, thank you for having me.
Yeah, so can you tell us a little bit about what this book is about rather than me trying to explain it? Can you tell me a little bit more about what it's about?
Absolutely. So the book is sort of a series of questions and answers, sort of casually, conversational style between myself and 5 different monastic contemplative communities of nuns. In most cases, it's the Mother Superior of that monastic community. In one of the cases, it was a couple of the nuns volunteered to answer my questions sort of as a group. I think there were 3 of them that worked together. But I focus on contemplative monastic communities on the idea of motherhood, something that we share in our vocations. So contemplative nuns, mothers, lay mothers of children, we are all called to the vocation of motherhood. And it looks very different on the outside, but it's exactly the same on the inside, spiritually. And so I thought to myself, I'm always asking other mothers for their advice, their thoughts, their opinions. How would they do this? Why don't I ask the mothers in the other vocation the same sorts of questions, the things that I struggle with in my vocation, the things that I need clarity on, the things that I would like to be more at peace with about my own vocation as a mother. What do they have to say about motherhood? And their answers were absolutely delightful and inspiring to me. And I'm glad that other people are finding them equally as powerful.
And so so just so that all of us are on the sort of same, I always sometimes repeat things and I apologize for that. But so here is this book where Dr. Mary Elizabeth interviews nuns about motherhood. Now, eh, how did you sort of come to that? Did that come to you? Because that's a remarkable idea and it's a beautiful one. How did you come to that? Did it come to you in prayer or did it just, how did that idea come to you? Because it's
Sure.
incredibly novel.
So it actually came to me at a playground. And I wrote about it in the introduction to this book. I was at a playground with my kids and a bunch of my fellow homeschool moms in the area. And we were, standing around talking and our kids are playing and a Capuchin nun happens to drop by. And you never see a Capuchin nun at the playground, at least none of the playgrounds that I normally frequent. And so I went over, said hi, started talking to her. It turns out she's the sister-in-law of one of my mom friends, and she's home for a brief visit. And we started talking about, what it's like to be a nun, what it's like to be a mom, all these other things. And then she says, a lot of people don't really understand contemplative nuns, but really we're just the stay-at-home moms of the religious vocation. And I thought, wow, I never thought of that before, right? But it's so true. They are the stay-at-home moms of the religious vocation. And we have the active sisters whom we all, know and love, who go around to hospitals and schools and but the contemplative moms are the stay-at-home moms. And I'm a stay-at-home mom too. And I thought, well, what do we have in common other than that, or flowing from that? What do we have in common? So we started talking more, and I thought, I need to really plumb this plumb this question and just see how far can I go with this and what can I learn from this insight. So I'm very glad I went to the playground that day. I'm glad she was home visiting that day because it was just this burst of inspiration and had a lot of beautiful moments after that with various nuns.
Yeah. And so I remember when I became a mom many, many, many years ago now. My 27-year-old son just got engaged, and
Congratulations.
my daughter, older than that, just made me a grandma. So, but I remember, when I had first become a mother, I was heavily involved in sort of the corporate world and I had a bit of a history of, traveling and delivering customer service seminars and how to be successful in, a successful woman in business with image and communication. And then when I had this baby, I'm like something has happened to me, and I didn't know exactly what had happened to me. And I started reading dozens and dozens of books on motherhood. I think, all of us do, but none of them kind of like were hitting the mark in terms of what had happened to me. And can you tell us, the listeners, what in your mind maybe happens to a woman when she becomes a mother that maybe isn't really kind of talked about that much in ordinary books, if that makes any sense?
Right. This was a sort of a central theme that the nuns and I kept coming back to is the vocation of women, right? And men have their own unique calling from God, depending upon which of the vocations that they're called to. But all women, our vocations always boil down to that which is central to our being as women, that God created us for. And all women are called to be mothers,
Mhm.
full stop, right? It looks different for different women, right? So one of the mothers that I was speaking to in this book, 95-year-old Mother Superior of a Byzantine Carmelite monastery that she was the foundress of, she's a mother. She's sort of a grandmother and a great grandmother now too, right? Of religious. She has fostered so many vocations. She has, dozens and dozens of daughters, and her vocation to motherhood is just as real and is just as much as a vocation as mine. And I have 5 little kids running around. And the wisdom that she has of meditating over those years about what does it mean for a woman to embrace her nature as a mother was deeply inspiring, because what she kept coming back to, and all the nuns kept coming back to, is when we become mothers, right? When we embrace that calling, because you can run away from the calling, right? And even women who have babies can run away from that calling to be a mother, right? And a nun can run away from her calling to be a mother within her vocation, right? But when we embrace that, what we're doing is we're embracing what we were made to be, right? And understanding how we are supposed to be as a mother within the vocation that God has called us to is our life's work. So we might be called to do other things as well, but those things sort of flow around and are in addition to that central calling, because that central calling is to sort of embrace our nature. And so nothing else can get in the way of that, or nothing else should get in the way of that, which I find really beautiful and kind of freeing too, because once you acknowledge that this is the thing that you were put on earth for, right? This calling of motherhood, right here, right now, doing it in this particular way. All of the things that are sort of floating around on the outside aren't as important anymore, because they're in addition to your calling as a mother. I started off being a mother as an academic, went to work, taught classes, came home to my kids. And, there are moms that make that happen, and can flourish in that sort of setup. I was not flourishing, and I sort of had to really come to terms with myself and say, do I want to follow what God has called me to be? Or do I want to sort of say no halfway? And sort of the calling that these nuns talk about in my book, and their embrace of their vocation and their nature as mothers is beautiful, and it's freeing. Even if you feel like you're making tons of sacrifices and letting go and losing along the way, you lose in order to gain. And that was a central sort of takeaway that I got in speaking to these nuns. In giving, we receive back, if we're giving the right things up, right, to God.
And so I just, if I could, if I could jump through the screen and give you a hug, I would, because you're just so beautifully articulating so many things that sort of happen to so many of us on an interior level, but we're unable to name it, right? Like, and one of our missions in starting these Catholic moms groups is just to help Catholic moms meet other Catholic moms so that they might respond to some of these promptings that are happening on an interior level that they can't name. And so
Right.
thank you for being such an incredible instrument in articulating, and I'm going to be doing actually my very best to get the word out about this book, Mother to Mother. Now, Nelsie, one of our mothers group leaders here, mentioned too that that very often stay-at-home moms live in part a bit of a monastic life, and
Yes.
that we're encouraged to create the atmosphere in our homes to be a bit monastic. And if I were to remove that black billboard, you'd see that it's not too monastic. I'm hiding a bit of a messy kitchen in a bit of a hurry to get ready today. But can you tell us a little bit about that idea, about the idea, because like sometimes it sounds a bit heady, like, oh, we're supposed to, the home is supposed to be a domestic church, and we're supposed to create a monastic environment. And meanwhile, we're running in and out of hockey. Meanwhile, we're trying to decide what to do with dinner, or what do we do with the dog that's running around, right? So can you just talk a little bit about that, about how a mother might create a monastery in her own home or a monastic environment? I'd love to hear your.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things that I thought was so cool and kind of made it a little bit less intimidating, or sort of austere sounding, that, you know, that we lead a bit of a contemplative life, or to create a monastery of our homes, right? Like that can kind of sound like a little like, yeah, do I really want to do that? But when you talk to the nuns about their monasteries and the cloister and the contemplative life, they're always emphasizing that it is a home, it is a family, right? So we're talking about making our families and our homes contemplative and monastic. They're talking about making sure the monastery is at heart a family and a home. So it's beautiful because it all ends up being the same, right? It's like we're all rushing towards the same goal, and we're using different names because we're kind of rushing from slightly different angles, but then it ends up being the same prize at the end that we're looking for. And so, you know, what does that mean to make our homes a little bit more contemplative, a little bit more monastic? Part of it is understanding sort of our charism, right? And this is something I talked about one of the chapters of the book. And they're very short chapters because I can't sit down and write a big chapter, and most of my readers can't sit down and read big chapters. So they're little. So they're designed to sort of like, oh, I've got a minute. Here we go. But one of the chapters I talked about charism with the nuns, and like different monastic communities have different emphases. They have slightly different ways of living out their contemplative nature, right? So we have the contemplative Poor Clares. They practice strict enclosure. They never leave, right? They're there until they die. Then we have the Benedictines, where it's a much less strict sense of cloister, where, you know, for good reason they go out and they come back in, and it's and that's always the way they've been. It's different emphases in their charism based off of what they feel God is calling them to do within that. And if you think about parenthood and motherhood, we also have different charisms based off of our personalities, based off of our family dynamic, the needs of our children. You know, I've got a good friend. She's sort of a little family church on wheels. Like, she takes her kids everywhere and they do everything. That's her charism as a parent, right? I can't do that. I tried once and we just about lost it. And I thought, I can't try to do her charism. That isn't the way. It is her way that she's been called to. My way, something different, right? And so leaning in and sort of meditating on the gifts that God has given you, the challenges God has set before you, and sort of the needs of your family sort of dictate what your home life, you know, what your little cloister of home is going to look like as well. And so I thought that it was very, very useful to sort of have that reflection on charism with the nuns. Sort of, you know, I don't need to see how she is doing it down the road and imitate her exactly. What I want to do is imitate the spirit of what she's doing if I see something beautiful going on there. But I don't necessarily have to do it the exact same way. They're beautiful Benedictines, beautiful Capuchins, beautiful Carmelites. But if that Carmelite tried to do it the Benedictine way, she might wilt. And if I try to do it the Montessori way, I know I'll wilt. Even though, and I'm like, that's so lovely. I love that, but it's not for me. For some reason, God has not called me to a Montessori life, right? So this sort of reflection on charism and how we are supposed to respond to our calling, and how we're supposed to craft that contemplative nature. And then the different sections where I talk to the nuns on prayer, on solitude, on quiet, just like these different moments where you can find ways to turn your family life into a place where prayer is. I think that's central to all. I mean, not I think, I know prayer is what's central to all monastic communities. If they're not there for the prayer, then they might as well pack up and leave. But the same is true with us, right? We're not just making sure the dishes are clean, and we're not just making sure the kids, you know, have their shoes on before we walk out the door. And is to walk towards God and to get into heaven and to get our kids into heaven. And all the rest of it isn't as important, right? And so they had many really wonderful practical tips for how to respond to the call to pray and to foster prayer. And I've sort of started trying to do some of that with my kids, and it's just very, very cool. And it's not as hard as you think it's going to be. You know, we think of nuns sitting in church praying for hours, and I think, well, I can't do that for 5 minutes before somebody does something and I have to take them out, right? But that isn't all prayer is. So one of the nuns gave me this advice that I thought was really cool. And she said, one of them is just meditate on the face of Christ as he is showing himself in the face of your child. So I can do that anywhere, and I can do that at any time, and I can do that at any noise level. And if I use that as a form of prayer, then it is a prayer, right? Because that's what God has called me to do in that moment, to meditate on his face and the face of my child. And that makes prayer so much easier.
Yeah, no, and just for those of you maybe that are tuning in a little bit later, we're speaking with Dr. Mary Elizabeth Cuff, the author of Mother to Mother. I love the sort of subtitle, Spiritual and Practical Wisdom from the Cloister to the Home. I think it's a brilliant, brilliant subtitle. Now, there are many chapters in the book. There's, the whole idea of home as monastery, the calling of motherhood, motherhood and true femininity, motherhood and nurturing, sacrifice, isolation and solitude, obedience, silence. And it goes on and on and on. And there are, so many very, very practical, so there are just tons of practical tips in this book. So I would definitely encourage each and every one of you to get a copy of it. Now, again, just I remember when, again, I don't mean to be bringing things back to myself, but as when I became a mom and I'm like, okay, something has changed. I know I can't be the mom that I want to be, continuing to do what I am doing. And, sort of following these interior promptings and reading and reading and reading. Another book that sort of just popped up in my life, and I encourage all of you, if you can, we include it in every single one of our Catholic Moms Group starter kits when moms are starting out. It's the Apostolate of Holy Motherhood. And so the central theme is that our main kind of mission is to become or strive towards holiness ourselves and for our children, and that is the sort of true essence of motherhood. And many mother books that we read on motherhood, talk about maybe what formula to use, or talk about what stroller is the best, or what, and so can you tell us a little bit more, um, Mary, just about some of the things maybe that moms need to be focusing on? And of course, if you'd like to draw um, draw from your book, that as Catholic mothers, we do have a vocation. And one question I always like to ask mothers is, well, how's a Catholic mother different than a secular mother that you meet in a hockey arena, for example, right? So what might mothers be doing or thinking about that would set us apart from other mothers?
Well, I think what's very beautiful about understanding motherhood, both as a nun and as a mother, a lay mother, from a Catholic perspective, is that both of our vocations sort of stem from Our Lady. And I talk about this with the nuns in my book. And, Our Lady is, the mother of heaven and earth, right? She is the mother of God. We believe that as Catholics. And so she is our example as the perfect mother of children, right? But she is also the original nun, right? She contemplates the Lord in the silence of her heart. That is the definition of a nun. And so she is the original and the greatest nun. And she's not the original, but she is the most perfect of all mothers. So both of the ancient vocations that the church offered to women to sort of help us live out our vocation to be mothers set Our Lady up as our source of inspiration and as our model. So what we as Catholic moms and Catholic nuns are supposed to think about is how am I modeling Our Lady? How am I becoming a little Mary for my family and for my larger community, for the church, for the world, right? So, we are all called as Christians to become like Christ. As women and as mothers responding to the vocation of motherhood, we are called to become like Mother Mary. And that is both extremely amazing, extremely beautiful, and a little terrifying. So that's what sets us apart, or what should set us apart. I fail at it every single day. And then at the end of the day, I go, okay, tomorrow we're going to give it another try and try to be better, and very imperfectly attempt to model the perfect, mother of God. But then she is our chief helper in that, right? She has done all of it. She suffered it all. She experienced all the joys. She understood the calling better than anyone. So she can help us better than anyone. So that's also what set us apart. We have her as our sort of, phone a friend. And, that's amazing, right?
Yeah, and thank you for that. And again, sometimes I sound like a broken record. Is sort of when your children are saying to you, but mom, so and so has an iPad, but mom, I always encourage Catholic moms to say that yes, our family is different. It is different. And sometimes when my children would, pull at my apron strings, although I never wore an apron, and sort of say, well, I want this and I want that. And I would say, well, look, you know, Bill's mother down the street, well, they had a divorce and she drinks a bottle of wine Saturdays afternoons. Maybe I should do that. And they're like, Mom! No, and so I think that very often Catholic moms don't claim authority over that difference and confidence over
Right.
that difference. Yes, we are different, and we're different in a variety of different ways. We turn to our Blessed Mother. Yes, we pray. Yes, we go to Mass. Here are the differences. But there's also a real danger if, my mom, I was born in Poland and come from a devout Polish family. And one thing that my mother used to always say, in Polish, kobieta musi być do tańca I do różańca. And what that means is that a mom needs to be, know how to pray the rosary, but she also knows how to dance the polka, right? So,
I love that.
because if we don't know how to, like if a home is very austere and very serious, and not that there's anything wrong with,
Right.
kneeling with rocks under our knees, but there's no fun, then it's going to be hard. It's going to be a hard sell to keep the family engaged in a happy way, right? So this idea of being joyful and at the same time being prayerful. Now, are there any other ways that Catholic moms would be different? Yes, we claim Mother Mary as our Blessed Mother. Yes, that's what we do. And we turn to her. Any other thoughts on how Catholic moms might be different?
Well, it is our vocation, right? And we understand vocation differently. So the fact that we became physical mothers, we also became spiritual mothers. And a lot of secular women, they think in terms of, academics, they think in terms of sports, and we should be too. Those are important. And God gave us brains and gave us bodies and gave us muscles for a reason. And he wants us to use them to the best of our ability. Don't squander any of the talents that he gave us, whatever they might be. But we have that added layer, right? Or not even just a layer. It's sort of that spiritual element that shoots through all of it, right? And because we are called, motherhood is for us a vocation and not just a physical or social setup, that changes the game entirely for us, right? A vocation is a calling, a divine summoning, right? A divine summoning to.
I love that. Sorry. A divine summoning. Did you hear that, ladies? The divine is summoning you. I love it. Thank you. Sorry.
Rather insistently. I mean, we look at, the old stories, we look at the Bible, right? When God summons someone, it's a little spooky, right? You think of Samuel and God is calling to him in the darkness, or Moses with the burning bush, and ours seems a little bit more everyday, right? And I talk about this in the book when we talk about the idea of martyrdom, right? And martyrdom, we think of lions, we think of, gladiators and colosseums and all these other things, and you think, okay, well, I am probably never going to be a martyr unless, current events change pretty significantly in my neck of the woods. But we are also called to be martyrs, right? And the church historically has thought of that. And part of your vocation is to embrace your crown of martyrdom. So, I recount the story in the book. My husband and I got married in the Eastern Rite of marriage, the Byzantine Rite, and they crown you with crowns as part of that rite, which is very beautiful. And the crowns are attached by ribbons. So the husband and the wife are crowned, and they're attached by a ribbon. And the priest, and I don't remember all the words of the prayer, but they're your crowns of authority as father and mother of your household, right? You're the king and the queen of your household, but also they're your crowns of martyrdom, is what he told us. And he said, you are called in your vocation. It's no longer about you. You were called to die to yourself and your own needs and your own wants and your own opinions for the sake of the good of those that you have been called to serve in your vocation. Nuns are often crowned with crowns when they take their vows as well. It's their crown, it's their wedding crown historically, and some will actually dress in wedding dresses to give their vows. They're also crowns of martyrdom, right? They are called to die to the world, and more importantly than the world, die to themselves, right? So that's what sets us apart as well. In our idea of vocation, we are called to be martyrs. Martyrdom of 1,000 paper cuts, or a martyrdom of 1,000 spilled cups of milk, or whatever it is the kids are doing today. It's a delightful martyrdom in some ways, right? I kind of vastly prefer it to the lions, honestly, because there's a lot of I love my kids. They're great. They're definitely not lions. But there is suffering attached, and some parents are called to more suffering than others. I have friends that have suffered terrible miscarriages, friends that have lost children, friends that really suffer, and that's part of their vocation, right? So through the joys, through the sorrows, this idea of motherhood as a calling by God, but also a calling by God to martyrdom, dying to ourselves for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. And that's a prayer.
Oh my gosh, I'm just so delighted. I'm thrilled meeting you, and I love, I'm really enjoying this interview. Many years ago, I wrote a book called Motherhood Matters. And I remembered, as I was writing this book, I thought, I am not qualified to write this book. I know some of you here have read Motherhood Matters, and um, but I kept on, I kept on saying, I know I'm not a good writer, but like something needs to be written. And, but I knew that there was this whole other level that I wasn't able to articulate it. And so meeting you has just been such an incredible gift. So thank you.
Thank you. That's heartening. Thank you very much.
No.
I also knew I was not, when I first came up with the idea to write the book, I was like, I can't write a book on motherhood. I don't even have teenagers yet. And I thought, well, I'll go to the nuns, talk to the nuns, and I will learn. So this book is not a, let me tell you how to be a mother book. This book is I'm a mom. I know these things about motherhood. I know it's my vocation. Let me go and ask moms who've been thinking about motherhood for a long time their advice, right? So we're all, and the nuns told me like, they're not experts either. So I said, I told one nun, you're an expert at praying. How do I pray? And she says, no, I'm an expert at trying to pray.
Yes.
That's a very important distinction. right? Nuns spend their whole lives trying to fulfill their vocation the way it should be fulfilled. And that makes it more encouraging when I get into bed at night and I go, darn, I didn't do a very good job today. I was pretty cranky at everybody all day long. That's not a good way to do this. And then I think, no, I'm trying. I didn't try very well today, but that's why God is allowing me to try again tomorrow, right? You don't have to be perfect the first time.
Yes.
Being perfect by the end is what we're going for.
Now, one chapter that really resonated with me, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about it, is as I was kind of writing my own book, I was trying to sort of figure this out and that out, and I didn't nail it very well at all. But the one thing I tried to do in my home is to incorporate, as my children were growing up, um, periods of silence, right? And so no music, no videos, no just to foster the ability for children to spend time in quiet. And, as soon as they were able to talk or communicate with me, I would often say, like, look, God wants to talk to you, and he can't talk to you if there's always noise on, music on. He needs to get your attention a little bit. And so you never know what Jesus might say to you. And I grew up blessed under the care of the Felician nuns. And the sister that prepared me for my first Holy Communion, she always stressed how children's prayers were more important than adult prayers, and that children's prayers were answered. And so I would often communicate that with my children, right? Is that your prayers are extremely important. And Mama, as a mother, I need your prayers, and God wants to talk to you and encourage you in praying. And so you got to live. So they'd be like walking around that. It was so fun. But can you tell me a little bit more about the nuns' commitment to silence and your thought on silence and motherhood? And we
Right.
live in such a world of distraction that chapter really spoke to me.
Right. Yeah, silence is a tricky thing, right? Because, I'm trying to teach my children to value silence and to be able to have silence. And yet I'm out of practice too. The world doesn't really like silence, and it tries very hard to keep, bringing some sort of noise and bringing some sort of distraction in. And so I have to practice it myself if I'm going to, help my children with it. And silence isn't just the visual, the audible, what I can hear, it's all the distractions, right? So, I'll try to foster a quiet time, and then I find myself picking up my phone, and I'm like, that's not really quiet. And if I'm doing that quietly in the corner, they're going to notice, right? And so I have to do it too, and I have to be just as committed to it as they are, because they're watching. They're always watching. And one of them will point it out in a rather snarky way, and I know which one. But cultivating the idea of silence, obviously different children have different abilities, and with that, some of my kids are more naturally apt to it than others. But I think something that I have found useful that the nuns emphasized is that sometimes it's not the amount of silence that you have, it's what you do with the silence when you get it, right? So maybe you just take tiny moments for silence, right? And to sort of try to push all of your distractions out of the way, in order to let God speak, right? It doesn't have to be for long stretches of time. It definitely shouldn't be longer than your kids can, sort of endure. We don't want to make them hate silence, right? And so that what they emphasize is, it isn't so much the amount of silence, though for them they do have a wealth of silence. This is what you do with it, right? And I loved their thoughts about what you do with the silence, those tiny minutes you snatch in a day to sort of shut the world out and just be in the presence of God, right? And it's sort of like making a sort of a small almost like Eucharistic, adoration, even if you're not there, where, in a Eucharistic chapel, right? So obviously that's the best place to be for something like that, but you can enter into the presence of God wherever you are. And so in these like tiny moments of silence, one of them described it as having a tiny little closet in your head. And you go in there and you just shut the door for a couple of minutes, right? And just exist in the presence of God, right? And trying to teach your children how to do that too, that can be really tricky because I think that is a fairly grown-up sort of idea to sort of just be in the presence of God, right? With my kids, I've started trying to teach them the Psalms. The nuns said that that's a good way to pray, and it's a very calm way to pray, a very quiet way to pray. So we've picked one of the Psalms and we just say it in the evening, right? As a family, and the kids are slowly memorizing it. And the little ones, they get it as kind of earworms, and they'll just sort of like throughout the day kind of say part of the Psalms, right? My 4-year-old he's all, like playing with his cars and he's like saying part of the Psalms because it's stuck in his head. And that's sort of a win towards silence, right? Because it's an ordering of your thoughts. And he doesn't even realize that's what's happening to him. And he's not doing it on purpose. And he's not a particularly pious kid. It's just when you get in the habit of doing something, right? Like if you play that certain kid song every single day, your kid's going to hum it. If you recite that psalm every day as a family, your kid's going to say it. And it isn't silence yet, but it's a sort of meditation. It's a sort of stepping into the presence of God, using this ancient, sort of ritualized way of speaking. That's sort of setting him on a path towards being able to do that, I think. So,
Yeah.
and
No, that's beautiful. And so, again, there are dozens and dozens of tips in the book itself. And again, I underlined almost every other page. I was like, oh my gosh, I found it. I found it. I found the book that articulates sort of these interior, I don't know what they are, inspirations or that I just haven't been able to communicate. And I was just so excited. And someone was asking, well, where can I get the book? And is it on Amazon? It is on Amazon, but I would encourage you to go to the Tan Bookstore website online. Not too long ago, they had it on sale, and I don't know if it's still on sale, but I know that it was. So go to Tan Books. It's a book that's published by Tan, and there are dozens and dozens of tips in the book. Now, another question that keeps on kind of popping up, and I want to make sure I ask you the question because I'm looking, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's 10 to 3. And I think I could talk to Mary Elizabeth forever, 10 more minutes. But so we talked about, Catholic moms being different from, worldly moms. We talked about a couple of ideas on how we might create our homes to become a bit of a monastery. We talked about, all of us having different charisms. And I remember once picking up Kimberly Hahn and Dr. Scott Hahn from the airport because we had invited them to Toronto, and my husband and I had the privilege of picking them up. And I think with every breath Kimberly has, she kind of encourages people to homeschool, right? That's her charism. And I was going like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? I don't think I have the cerebral capacity, and I think my kids would just learn so much more. So I love this idea that we all have different charisms. That was beautiful because yes, we all have different charisms. And we also talked about that as Catholic moms, we turn to our Blessed Mother. And I've always struggled with that because I'm kind of a flamboyant extrovert that often wears red lipstick and red glasses. And I speak to my spiritual director and I'm like, Father, I don't know, I don't know whether I could ever be a model of our Blessed Mother. And he looked at me and he says, like, don't forget, Jesus's mother was a Jewish mom. And,
True.
and so it just gave me a lot of just reassurance that yes, that different personality types and different charisms can animate the virtues of our Blessed Mother. Now, the question I'm wanting to ask you is, you see right now in a lot of Catholic circles, and sometimes it scares me a little bit, that there's a lot of talk about, being wounded, and that when we're wounded, that we can't be good mothers because we're lashing out, and we need healing, and we need therapy, we need courses, we need this program, the wounded healer, and we have to have a Catholic mindset and get a Catholic coach. And I'm kind of like, yes, I always say I get wounded every day, and I'm trying to minimize woundedness. But do you have any thoughts on that, maybe mothers that have been wounded and maybe they didn't have a good and wholesome um, mother, maybe they were wounded somehow in the past, and how that might be affecting their mothering. And I'm sure there are nuns that have been wounded before they entered into the convent. I know that's a mouthful, I'm sorry. But do you have any thoughts?
Sure, sure. Um, I do know that trend, and I do find it troubling as well. I mean, I'm sure plenty of women have had, less than pleasant upbringings, and that is something that stays with people. But, I think one of the great joys of church history is you see all these saints that had truly terrible childhoods, and they found a way through the grace of God to not let it stop them, right? That they were able to be bigger than what had happened to them through the grace of God. Because if God is calling you to something, it doesn't matter what has happened to you in your past. He's never going to ask you to do something bigger than you can do, which is a comfort, right? And I keep going back. One of my favorite people I've met through the course of this book was, again, that Byzantine Carmelite foundress. Her story, and I recount her story in the book. I would have quit so many times if I had encountered the things that she encountered. Just she was a normal Carmelite before founding the Byzantines, and her monastery broke apart after Vatican II. Different nuns wanted to do different things, they wanted to go different ways, and her vocation just was blown up. She said her life is a series of explosions. And I think that each explosion, she said the explosions ended up being good things, right? Because even though they were terrible when they were happening, and she's not like, oh, it was wonderful that my monastery ripped itself to pieces and the treasurer left with all the money, which happened. That was an evil, right? But the explosions, sort of the shockwave of that explosion in her life, pushed her further towards what it was that she was ultimately called to do. And she had to remember to constantly say yes, and not say, oh no, Lord, only if, or first let me work on that, right? She found herself in a field with a can of food and lights that didn't work, and 3 nuns who were looking at her going, now what, mother? And she said, well, we'll pray to Saint Joseph, right? And we're just going to keep going. And I think about that often. And I think about all the things that God has given me, right? And maybe there's things that I'm struggling with, right? But if God is calling me to this, then there is a path, right? There is a path through. And if I don't see the path, that doesn't mean there isn't one. It means I need to have more trust in him. And I need to just keep stumbling in the dark until my feet find the path that he has already laid out. And that's the faith that these nuns talk about, right? In their vocations, it's constantly saying yes. and finding those places in you where you are too scared to sort of unclench your fist and let go of certain things that honestly need letting go of because God has called you to something. And what he has called you to is bigger than anything else that could ever happen to you, right? And with that in mind, I mean, mental health is a real thing. Mental health struggles is a real thing. Like terrible upbringings is a real thing. But I know so many amazing moms that have sort of opened up their childhoods to me. And I think to myself, wow, you had so many chances of turning out horrible if you had just sort of been the product of the explosions. But you chose not to be the product of your explosions, right? You chose to say yes to God. And even when you thought that your yes wasn't good enough because of things that had happened, you trusted him to make up the difference. He did, And that's something I struggle with all the time is trusting him to know what he's doing. Because he seems to think that I'm capable of a lot more than I think I'm capable of. So
Yeah. No, that was such a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful that was just a bouquet. That was such a beautiful response, and thank you for it. Now, uh, this is a sensitive issue, and we've got 4 minutes, and I could probably talk to you forever. But I know that one conviction that I have, and it's a personal conviction, and I'm not trying to lay this conviction on anyone else. And it's not my attempt to make anyone feel guilty or anything like that. But I have this really strong conviction that if we cling to our Blessed Mother and we beg our Blessed Mother and we reorient our lives to try to seek God's will, and we do have a sacramental life and a prayer life and all those things, and that if we beg our Blessed Mother, she will show us a way to be able to stay at home in those early years. Right?
it's true. It's true. I think it's true.
Right? That she will show us a way. And that very often, I just find that, like, a lot of women just don't dare to believe, right? And a lot of women are also, our culture has taught us that we have to do everything ourselves, right?
Right.
I better make my house beautiful. I better make my body beautiful. I better contribute to the bottom line of, the finances. I better, and there's this almost idolatry of self, right? That I have to do it all, and that if I don't do it, it's not going to happen. And I don't know whether that's because we've become, whether we're products of the feminist movement, and sometimes it takes radical trust and radical sacrifices. Um, but and just to even, I know that in the early years, I did my absolute best, and I failed a zillion times, but I did my absolute best to get to daily mass because I kind of had a crisis, with my father dying suddenly, and I thought, okay, if everything my mother said about the Eucharist is true, then that Eucharist should be more powerful than antidepressants, and I tried to order my life, in that way. And following that conviction and clinging to Our Lady and crying and praying and dealing with all sorts of crosses and near-death illnesses, I'm here. And I just want to encourage moms to trust their hearts more, to trust those promptings more. Like you let go of some academic, opportunities. And can you just talk a little bit about that? Again, I could talk to you forever.
Sure. Yes. Yeah. I was actually driving home from work one day, and I was, on track to become a professor, and it's what I always wanted to be. And I was thinking about my students, and I was like, they haven't learned so much. Like they don't love learning. How do I teach them how to love learning? And I was thinking about it, and the more I thought about it, I was like, well, I'd have to start earlier. I'd have to start here. I'd have to start there. And then I thought to myself, wait a minute. I could design such a fun and cool and interesting way to teach a kid, but I have to start when they're a toddler. And then I thought, oh, what am I doing? I have toddlers. Why don't I want to do this with them? I was homeschooled myself. My mom was a school teacher who quit and homeschooled us. And, there were 6 of us, and she homeschooled. Some days I call her and I go, Mom, how did you do it? I don't know how you do it. I remember our house was clean growing up. And she goes, oh, no, it was a mess all the time. I'm like, well, I remember it being clean. And I was like, and I remember you never got mad at us. And she goes, oh, really? Because I totally did. And so I remember that. I just remember, I learned stuff. I got a PhD from my mom's education. And all of a sudden, and I'm like, okay, how did Mom do it? I can do it too somehow, probably in a different way than she did it, because she's a very different person than I am, but I think what stops a lot of us is fear, right? When you find yourself sitting there with a couple of toddlers and your husband's at work and everybody else is at work or something like that, and it's just you and a couple of babies, and you're like, well, now what? This is boring, right? Like your kids are fun, but not all day long, right? Right? Like, what do I do now, right? I think there's a lot of fear, right? Well, there's a lot of fear in the idea of planning a monastery too. What do they do? They just pray all day. Oh my gosh, I couldn't do that, right? It turns out there's such a delight, right? And you're so busy, and there's so many cool and interesting things you can do, and it's different for everyone, right? And not everyone's called to be a homeschool mom. I've met some women trying to make it that I'm like, wish I could come up with a gentle way where I could tell her that maybe she's, and I'm sure some moms look at me and say the same thing. So, with God's grace, there we all go. But I think a lot of it is fear. Fear because the world thinks that we're wasting our time and that we are wasting our talents, that we're wasting financial opportunities. I see people say online all the time, like, oh, a middle-class family or working class family can't have a stay-at-home mom. They can't have lots of, I know dozens, and thank God, and it's reaffirming to me that yes, we can. Don't let the world tell you you can't. They haven't tried. If you can, right? Then, if you think you can, just try it, right? If it's not working, then, then you can adjust, you can fiddle, you can whatever, right? But don't let fear stop you. And don't let fear of losing your identity stop you, because remember, motherhood is the core of your identity, and everything else comes out of that, right? I still write, I still research, I still do academic things, but I have put it to the side because it isn't who I am. It's a thing that I do. It's a thing that I love. It's a thing that I enjoy, but it isn't who I am. Who I am is a mother. And that is what I am called to do, no matter what else I am called to do. If I'm called to go to the ends of the earth, only if it doesn't get in the way of my central identity as a mother, right? And so don't let your fear of the heart of who you are get in the way, right? And don't let anyone else tell you that you're wasting your time, because they don't know.
Oh, and again, thank you. We just been having this incredible interview with the author of a beautiful book. I encourage all of you to visit Tan Books and get a copy of Mother to Mother, Spiritual and Practical Wisdom from the Cloister to the Home by Dr. Mary Elizabeth Cuff. It's thought-provoking. It's full of practical ideas. Encourage you to go to Tan Books to get a copy of it. And again, the Holy Spirit is calling us. And I loved too how you said that we can say no, right, to these calls that we have. And anyway, I could talk to you forever. Be very practical for either of us, I don't think. But I also wanted to thank all of you who signed on today. Thank you, Natalie, for joining us. Thank you, Laura, for joining us. Thank you, Celestina, for joining us. And again, Nelsie, one of our Mothers Group leaders. And Susan Taras, you've got a comment here earlier this week on EWTN. He spoke of the cross and the crown and yes, and so I wanted to thank all of you for joining us. Elisa as well, thank you for joining us. And I would encourage you to visit TAN to get a copy of the book. And I would also encourage you to start a Catholic moms group where perhaps you could study the book, And I always find that when Catholic moms get together, just like I've gotten together today with Dr. Mary Elizabeth Cuff, that when we get together and we talk about these ideas, I sort of say it's like a supernatural campfire and it warms our hearts, right? And to meet other women that actually um, are are convicted of living out what our Blessed Mother has put in our hearts is just such a gift. And Mary, you've been an incredible gift today. You're a gift to so many. And I'm just trying to think of an opportunity to have you come to Toronto. Anyway, I'm going on.
Yeah, maybe sometime. My second daughter actually was born in North York, and she keeps saying, "Hey, can you take me back there to see it?" So one of these days we'll head north and
yeah, no, we're definitely going to have to chat with you a little bit further. Anyway, thank you all of you for signing on today. Please do remember about our upcoming conference at the Old Mill. We've got Annie Carto flying in from Florida to speak at it, Dr. Stephanie Caffey, Lisa Canning, and we also have a new initiative with a publication that's available on Amazon. It's called Your Life is Going to Change. And it is a publication aimed at moms that just had a baby or are baptizing in an attempt to get some of this thinking to them sooner. So there's a new publication on Amazon. If you go into the Amazon search bar and key in Your Life is Going to Change, our ministry has a new publication. We encourage you to get a copy for every expectant mother you see. So anyway, so thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you, Mary. And I'd like to know, just in closing, Rema's here. She's one of our Mothers Group leaders as well. If any of you have the time today to pray a full rosary for Dr. Mary Elizabeth Cuff and her family, I'd appreciate if you could pray for her in thanksgiving for her time. I'm going to be praying a full rosary for your intentions. And if anyone else here has the time, please, in thanksgiving, please pray a rosary for her that she may continue her journey of faith and that she may continue inspiring other mothers. Okay, so thank you. And
thank you very much.
And hopefully we can chat again soon sometime. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Okay,
you.
bye-bye. Bye now.
Bye.